Ah.
Hello.
Hi, Linnéa. Can you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Perfect. Very nice. We had some technical issues. That's why I only post the link now in the webinar, but I hope people will join very quickly.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, because it's a little bit complicated how it works with YouTube connecting to Hangouts.
All right, I see. Can you see me properly?
Yes, it works. We were gonna have some minutes before everyone joins to adjust a little bit, but I think it'll be fine. Okay. Now the link is up, and I hope lots of people are gonna join.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I can see you properly. Where are you right now? In your office, or?
Yes, I'm in my office in my basement, basically.
Also gonna see if the live stream is working. But yeah, also gonna see if the live stream. Perfect. Nice. I would say we're gonna wait for, let's say, 3 more minutes. Okay. Okay, I guess we can start now because people will maybe join, getting along with the, yeah. Then officially welcome and thanks for participating. Thank you for taking the time. And I also want to welcome everyone who's already watching, and hopefully there's going to be more. And yeah, my name is Bettina, and I'm a member of the International Committee, and I'm going to moderate this webinar. And maybe we can start with you, Linnéa, presenting yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me today. I hope you can hear me properly. So my name is Linnéa Engström. I'm a member of the European Parliament. I work in the Fisheries Committee and in the Committee for Gender Equality and in the Environment Committee. So that pretty much sums up my work in the Parliament. I'm a dedicated feminist and I usually put climate in the front of that because what I'm working on now fiercely is in accordance with the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals to sort of go from this kind of silo mentality and to sort of try to integrate perspectives. So that's what I'm really dedicated in doing. That's a very short introduction. I don't know if you want me to say anything more, but
maybe we can just go like step by step through different of your topics. For example, one of your topics is climate feminism. This is a rather Swedish thing, I would say, to connect those things like feminism and climate to each other. In my home country, I'm from Germany, and many people have probably never heard this term. So how open are people on the European level about this? Is it easy to talk to people to work on this, or is it rather difficult?
This is not a new thing at all, actually. The climate, it springs from the climate justice movement. So it's a big movement all over the world. Maybe the biggest one is in the United States, in the Western world. But then, of course, you have all of those women environmental activists in India and on the African continent working on integrating women's issues with environmental problems. And that's been going on since the 70s or the 60s almost. What I'm trying to do is to recognize all of those women who worked really, really, really fiercely with these subjects, because they tend to get lost in the overall climate debate, which is extremely male dominated. We're talking about 95% of men being the negotiators in the climate regime. So, I mean, the largest portion of environmental activists are actually women on the local level. And now we, of course, have the Paris Agreement with a lot of good language as well on gender equality and human rights. And that's, of course, extremely important to get this kind of fair deal that we're talking about. So the main issue now in Katowice in Poland with the COP24 is how to rebuild this trust between the rich world and the poor world. And that's mainly about climate justice, about the rich world paying for what they have polluted so far, and being, this kind of transmitter of technology also, so smart green technology to the developing world. And talking about climate feminism is really, lifting the stories about these women activists, and to say that we really need to invest in women on the local level, because they sort of hold the solution to how we're going to adapt to climate change. So, of course, we're now talking about stopping, banning fossil fuels and stopping all the carbon dioxides from entering the atmosphere. But what this has gone so far, so that we really need to adapt quite rapidly to a changing climate. And in that context, we really need to focus our attention to the ones who are most vulnerable, but also who are the most powerful change makers on the local level. So, I mean, that's I'm really building on a movement. I'm situating myself in history. I think that's very important. I mean, of course, I didn't come up with all of these things by myself, but what I did politically is, of course, to push through a report on climate refugees and climate justice, the first one ever in the European system, because this has mainly been an activist thing so far. But I think it's extremely important that the political institutions recognize all of these things, and that we start working on better representation of women and indigenous people in the climate regime.
Okay, thank you. Feminist economics, it's kind of a similar thing, because you also connect feminism with economics.
Yeah.
I think that has not been on the agenda yet in so many other European countries, member states. How do you convince people to pay more attention to this topic? And what are the people that you kind of bind with, cooperate with to convince?
Very good question. So my main allies when we talk about the feminist economics is the Spanish MEP and the Green Group, some British MEPs as well. So we quite recently had a group report on feminist taxonomy, for example. So we're still in a situation where we have a huge gender pay gap, we have a pension gap. Usually all of these caretaking roles that has to do with taking care of children, elderly people, people with disabilities, women are supposed to provide them for free or with very, very little pay. And that's underpinning our whole economy, but it's invisible, and it's very, very obvious when you look at the European economy, but also, of course, in some developing countries where women's work are almost invisible. I mean, they're not included in the official economy. So I think if we talk about Germany, for example, your home country, Bettina, you still have this kind of taxation of the family, which is something that we got rid of, let's say, like 30 or 40 years ago in Sweden. And that's because of, having this kind of own economy is extremely important to be self-reliant and independent. So that's very short. I mean, you could talk a lot about how we have built our societies, of course, where women are always supposed to provide like things for free, actually. So, but that's like the main point, I would say.
Yeah, that's really important work. I hope you also can make a little bit of an impact in Germany.
Well, we have some great MEPs from Germany as well in our green group. So I think they're doing a tremendous work. And sometimes I think the work on the European level is almost more important in countries like Germany, for example.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, when we stay with the topic of economics, one of your topics is also the green economy.
Yeah.
Where does the EU and its policies stand in this topic, and where are the individual member states? I guess Sweden is kind of leading the way.
Yeah. Well, I think a green economy, I think if you look at my, it seems like you've been looking at my homepage a little bit at least. So I am extremely fond of this kind of circular economy, which I know is a very old idea, but I think we've taken some really good steps and measures to make it, a real circular economy. So the problem is, of course, always implementation, because we're stuck in this linear economy where we kind of take a resource, use it, and then throw it away. Mm-hmm. I think most of the big companies and governments and also the European Commission has realized that this is extremely economic waste. It's crazy, really. So 80% of the value of a product is just thrown away. So it's really about economics. It's about really saving resources, saving energy, saving all of those things. So I think this mandate, we took a lot of legislation to make it firmer, to make it better. Plastic is one thing that is really a good material for having a circular life cycle. And food waste, I mean, there are so many things that we could enhance with the circular economy.
Okay, yeah. There's, for example, this policy that plastic straws were prohibited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you name some other policies that are less famous or popular?
Well, so plastic straws, plastic lids, plastic cutlery. There's like 10 items that we're supposed to ban now, and it's going to be the final negotiation is going to take place on the 19th of December. So it's been very, very quick. Well, then you have the whole circular economy package with clear goals. So at 2030, we're going to have this amount of recycling, for example. But the main thing with circular economy is, of course, to design products so you don't waste them, so that they are easily upgraded. You can easily take them apart and use them, and stuff like that. Or if you have a material, you can use that material. It's not wasted. It's not blended with other materials, or you have a lot of chemicals in it. So it should be quite a clean material so that you can use it in different settings. So all of those things, I think, it's very, very interesting. But once again, it really needs to work in practice. And of course, it all has to be built on renewable energy. And coming back to Katowice and the climate meeting that we're having this week and the next week, we have real challenges with renewable energy in Europe. I mean, Sweden has a very, very good stance on renewable energy. We are very close to having a fossil-free economy, but there are member states which are almost 100% dependent on renewable fossil fuels. So what to do with these countries? It's really, I think energy efficiency is one way. So a lot of these climate goals were supposed to manage with energy efficiency, for example, like smart products that are using maybe 50 or 70% less energy.
Okay, yeah, in those countries that are not so role models yet, for example, I guess Poland is one of them that is actually having the climate negotiations right now.
Yeah.
But what is the problem with them? Is there no political will, or is there just not the right technologies in place, or yeah, what is the problem with that issue?
Well, they have this coal industry, and that's where they are locked in a society where they are totally dependent on coal. So, I mean, that would mean phasing out all of those coal mines would mean like hundred thousands of losses in jobs. Of course, people are afraid. I mean, it's a huge challenge that we need to help them with. So I'm glad sort of that the green movement now has started talking about, you know, a just transition towards a green economy and like leave no one behind, because that's really what we need to ensure people that we will help each other to manage. Otherwise, we will never gain that kind of support from the ordinary citizens that we need.
Yeah. Okay. I also looked at your website, seeing that you were working also on fishing policies, and you were saying that you were actually working in the committee with this, and also protecting the sea. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what are the big issues right now with the current fishing policies in the European Union?
Yes, so we have a reformed common fisheries policy. I mean, this is actually where I do my main legislative work, because I have a very influential role actually in the fisheries committee. I'm a first vice chair. So I go to delegations, sometimes I lead the committee meetings and so on, and I've been able to do a lot of legislative files. I don't think many members who are in their first mandate get the chance to do that much of legislation. And it's been extremely interesting, like really to sit and negotiate with the council, for example. You really learn how these things are done. It's really, really, really exciting. But we have continued overfishing in the Union. It's extremely problematic, I would say. We're not supposed to throw any fish away anymore. We have this kind of landing obligation, but still member states don't want to implement it. It's a lot of hassle. It's a lot of quarreling. And I'm thinking how to make fishermen like the environmental activists of the 20th century, because they could make a huge difference. If they did all this work, our oceans are so extremely important to sort of, they are the support, they are our buffer against climate change. So, I mean, the reason why we're not in a total disaster is because the oceans are absorbing most of the carbon dioxide that we still emit in huge quantities. So we really need to take better care of our oceans. And we impose a lot of regulations on the fishermen, but we really don't give them the tools to be this kind of environmental activist that I'm looking for. So it would be very nice to have this kind of educational project to train young people to go at sea and maybe do some real work there.
Okay, I mean, you're chairwoman in the committee, but then I guess there's lots of members from other parties that are not as environmentally concerned. Probably they have even the majority. How does it work?
No, it's been extremely tough. The first 2.5 years, so we always have to build alliances with other parties. We have to have a majority to get our things through, and that we've managed with that quite successfully several times. So we managed to have this majority together with the socialists, the liberals, the left party, and some other free riders, let's say. But then things changed. You got a new coordinator, this kind of group leader in the socialists, and he sort of went with the enemy. So that's why, and when you approach election time, it's extremely difficult, because then starts the sort of hassling, and all the money should go to the fishermen, and it's then they sort of lose track of environmental concerns. But with all that fishing that the EU does outside of the Union waters, that there we were quite successful, actually. We managed to raise standards heavily, and that's because I was the rapporteur there, so I could, and it's very important to be responsible like that for legislation, because you can really, really change things then.
I guess that must feel good too.
Yeah. I mean, at least you have done something really, really important during these 5 years, and I'm extremely happy that I got the chance to work with that.
Yeah, sometimes you need those successes to keep going.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, something else about the fishing policies. What is the connection between Brexit and the European access to the fishing grounds around the UK? Because there has been some issues in the negotiations.
Yes. So this is a main battle. Fisheries is a very symbolic issue for the Brits. I mean, many fishermen voted to leave just because of taking back control of our waters kind of rhetorics. But that's all bullshit, of course, because there is no access to waters without access to markets. This is maybe something of the most closely tied sector we have in the European Union. So European vessels, or Dutch or Danish or French, they've been fishing in these waters for, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years. So and the British fishermen won't have a market to sell on if they don't have an agreement with the EU. So that's why it's this is not going to be a kind of a Brexit, a hard Brexit. I don't think so, because then all that fish, all that valuable lobster that they fish there, that will just rot in the border customs control, so to say. So they really need to, they can't close off their waters without having a deal on access to markets, and that's probably how this will come through, I think.
Okay. And now I also want to talk about the Baltic Sea, because I think as a Swedish, we are most interested in that.
Yeah.
There's, I guess, some big issues with overfishing, and also plastic and nets that are on the bottom and kind of give plastic particles into the water.
Yes.
Also say something about this.
Yeah, and you have this all this kind of leakage also from the agricultural lands, which is contributing to the ocean being totally messed up, actually. I don't know the word in English, but you have too many nutrients really in the water, and it's contaminating and making the algae sort of bloom too much, and then the whole ecosystem is in not in balance anymore. So you have a tremendous overfishing still going on. You have some stocks of cod which is close to extinction, or on the verge of breaking down, as we say. The situation is really, really poor. And the fishing ministers, they gather every year to set the quotas and the TACs, and they still manage to overfish. So I mean, it's an extremely technical debate to go into, but it's also how the scientists give scientific advice to these committee meetings, which is council meetings, which is extremely problematic from our point of view. since we have a reformed common fisheries policy, which sort of stipulates that, you know, we should have an ecosystem-based approach. But still, we're in a system where you ask the scientists on how much fish can we take out from the sea. So they give advice on the old policy, like the old mentality of the policy, which is very, very bad, of course. So what we need to do is also kind of to change the mentality of the scientists. Actually, the scientists need to work closer to the policymakers, because what they're doing now is actually they're sometimes violating the legislation that we all took together, that we fought so hard to get. So it's really a bad situation. I mean, then when it comes to the council meetings, they don't even follow the scientific advice. So I don't really understand anymore why this is a political decision. It's really we're destroying our oceans, and yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
It's a sad story.
Okay. Also, you also have on your website something about the European external fishing policy.
Yeah.
Why do European fishing boats even fish outside of European fishing areas? Heard this, but yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, our own waters is of course depleted to a large extent. 60 more, maybe more than 60% of the fish that we eat in the EU comes from somewhere else. So could be, of course, imported from Asia, but also fished outside of West Africa, for example. So that's what I've been working with to raise the standards there, because it's really a poor situation as well. And if we talk about our oceans being connected and all of these things that is so important for the Greens to save the oceans and to have a sustainable harvesting of marine resources, then we really need to care about all of those people, like 4 billion people who are depending directly on the oceans. So I've been extremely dedicated to those local communities in West Africa, which is solely dependent on fisheries, and how we can raise the standards so that the EU can take a better responsibility for its footprint, let's say, in those waters.
Okay, yeah. That is one problem, and then plastic in the sea is
Yeah.
the other, I guess. And you have already about how to try the European citizens to get to consume less plastic.
Yeah.
But how is it that all the plastic ends in the sea? And is there some policies that are especially aim at try to hinder the plastic that is already out to get into the sea?
Yeah, I mean, of course, in the circular economy package, we also ban this kind of open deposit of garbage. So it's waste that is usually taken away with winds out at sea. But usually when we talk about plastics, we say that this is mainly an Asian problem, right? So we blame the poor countries in Asia for not managing their plastic pollution. I mean, that's of course true. But what we need to keep in mind is that we used to export like 85% of all our single-use plastics to China and to other Asian countries. So probably it ends up in the ocean, which is then used by us as well. So what we need to do is, of course, heavily reduce single-use plastics, and then to find substitutes, and to increase investments in those substitutes that are already on the market. But then you can also use algae, for example, to make plastics, like thin plastics and plastics bags. So there are a number of innovative solutions to solve this plastic problem. And I think it's extremely important. All of that plastic that we put already out, it's probably lying on the sea floor. It's not even visible to our eyes. So that's why we also need to clean up. Of course, we need some ocean cleanup projects as well.
Is the EU actually funding those kind of research projects that encourage to do research on those new kinds of plastic, those new technologies?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. that's there are so many really cool projects going on. So, and I think there are so many young people also out there with some really good ideas. So that's why you can apply for this European Maritime and Fisheries Fund money and try to develop your ideas. Yeah,
that's really nice. Okay.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. I think I have covered all the topics that I actually found on your website. Is there
Cool. Thanks.
other you work with that you have want to share more about with us? Otherwise, I would go to some general questions.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that in the line with this climate feminist issue that I'm working on, I've managed to get the Green Group to produce a toolkit, a gender and climate toolkit for Europe, which we will present next weekend at the COP24.
That's nice. Yeah.
So that's extremely, I'm so delighted. And I hope all parties, like all member parties of the European Green Party, can use this gender and climate toolkit then in the European election. So it's going to be very exciting to see how we can sort of accelerate this, the transformation.
That's really nice. Yeah. Okay. I hope they also bring it to Germany.
Yeah, we'll make sure.
Now I would also like to ask some general questions about how the European Parliament is now made up of. For example, we would like to hear a bit about your predictions for the elections in May.
Yes.
Really is right now our the hottest topic that is really.
Yeah. This election is really extremely important. I mean, we can see that right-wing parties are mobilizing, and also these right-wing extremist parties. So I think we have a very good opportunity to really, we should have a hopeful and enthusiastic and positive approach to all of those challenges that we're facing. And of course, we look now at Bayern, the Greens that had such a great election in these regions in Germany and also in Belgium and Luxembourg. So, I mean, it is possible. We've been facing some real serious challenges in Sweden with being in government and so on. But I think we really need to mobilize to reach out to the progressive and the young voters to show them that there is hope. We have solutions. We are already making progress. We have a lot, we've already done a lot. The picture looks gloomy, but hey, come on, because without hope, I don't think we will not mobilize around climate change the way that we need to. So you need to have concrete proposals. You need to also show what has been going on the European level, because there's been a lot of good things happening. So that's my firm belief. And then you can add on like gender equality, human rights, or LGBT QI rights, because statistically, we are more likely then to convince people if we have this kind of more human rights-based approach together with our climate change agenda. So I think that's important too. And also, like, open societies. I mean, we want fair and just asylum policies, all of these things.
Yeah, okay. What do you think are the chances better or worse for MP on the European level than it was in the national elections? Because, I mean, the party is rather pro-European, so this could bring extra points.
Yes, I mean, we have to stay positive. You have to think that this is going to be our election, our coming back. And I think the European election is intrinsically very different from the national election. If you look at, I mean, I'm a political scientist myself. I read a lot of research. And if you look at the European election, people don't vote at all as they do in the national elections. So and the voter turnout is much lower, which is also positive for small parties. And people tend to prioritize quite differently. when they vote for the European level. And they are also quite knowledgeable, these people who show up for the ballot. So we're going down from 80, 85, over 80% of voter turnout in the national elections to approximately 54. So it's a lot lower. I mean, that's sad, of course, but it's also the voters that you really need to work with. And those voters are very knowledgeable.
Yeah, so fingers crossed for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how does it look like with the Green group, like the European Green Party in general, in the other member states? How does it affect the number of seats that we have in the European Parliament? Will it rather grow or go down? What is the general feeling?
So there's been this simulation, I think, from a big poll that sort of looked at the trend in all member states. Well, it didn't look so bright for us. So French Greens not really making it. Well, figures looks better now for the German Greens than they did like 1 year ago when we looked at these numbers. Finnish Greens might be better off. Spanish, I don't know, but we will probably face a parliament with a lot of right-wing extremists. I mean, a larger portion, and well, let's hope that we can steal some voters from Social Democratic Party, which is going down, and which is, you know, you have this kind of feeling that they're not really providing the answers for the citizens that is needed. So we could be like a progressive, hopeful force. That's what I hope for.
Okay. Nice. Is there any other interesting developments that you want to talk about in the European Parliament before we open up for questions?
I think the progression after Me Too is very interesting. Like how the Me Too movement managed to put real pressure on the institutions in the European Parliament, the Commission, and then how we have worked after that in order to increase gender equality. I think that's very interesting. Of course, it needs a lot of work, but this is really led by women, for women. I mean, for men as well, of course. I mean, I have fantastic colleagues, which is really like real feminist men. And you need those allies, of course, if you're going to make changes. So I think, yeah, Me Too, it really changed a lot.
Okay. Then let me see if there's some questions. All right. Okay. So one question is if the right-wing parties disturb you a lot in your work in the European Parliament? Like
the right-wing parties. Well, no, because I've had this approach that I work together with people and not against them. So it's impossible for, I was alone almost in my committee for 2.5 years. I didn't have a colleague that was really there every time. And I just sort of very quickly realized that I'm not going to have any possibility of doing any work here if I don't align, if I don't cooperate. So I invested a lot of time and effort into get to know people. Of course, you don't have the same approach. You come from totally different backgrounds, all of these things. But it tends to be a lot more easier if you trust each other, sort of, and they know that you're not playing an ugly game and all of these things. So I would say no, they don't bother me.
Okay. That is good to know and good to
hear. But I'm not a confrontative person, and I'm not aggressive, and I could never work like that. I'm really this kind of, I like cooperation.
Yeah, sure. Another question is, are you gonna be at the Katowice COP meeting? And what is your role gonna be? What kind of workshops are you gonna participate at?
Yes, I'm going to Katowice next week. I'm going to participate in a lot of seminars or workshops where I'm invited to talk about this gender and climate toolkit that I was talking about. So we're doing a press conference, of course, with the Green Group. Then I'm meeting like African leaders to discuss all of this because it's very relevant to them. Then we have a Nordic pavilion where I'm going to meet like business leaders to talk about how they can enhance gender and climate issues in their business sectors. What else? Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I have a lot of things going on actually in Katowice, so it's going to be very, very fun. A lot of fun.
I also came up with another question about how Sweden is actually trying to influence European climate policy. I mean,
yeah,
it's one of the leading countries, but most countries will be further backwards.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think we have done a lot of good work with the ETS, for example. So you have this kind of Swedish proposal that was actually just making it a more ambitious. This kind of you have a mechanism which withdraws these emission rights.
Yeah, like take out, just
So it's called Market Stability Reserve. And it was a commission proposal, but the Swedes come up with something to strengthen it, which was very important at the time. This had to be in 2015, I guess. So that's working very well. We could see a really good increase in the prices of these emission in the emission trading scheme. But still, of course, you need to come up on a very high level to have a real price on emissions. So I think it's up to 50 euros now, which is very, very good. That's a large increase, but it needs to, go up and up and up and up. Then we have Renewable Energy Directive, which I worked a lot on. So, of course, that was a big fight because it's also about nature, about preserving biodiversity, for example. But if you believe that the forest and all of these forest residues will play a part in the transformation to a green society, I think that was very important. It was mainly Finland and Sweden who was pushing for that. Also, for the first time, we have forestry included and counted off the Paris Agreement, which I also think is very important. That was also kind of very important file for Sweden. So I think we've made a lot of progress on a number of files.
Okay, yeah, and I have another question which is connected to this. What is the role of the European Union in the international climate negotiations?
Yes, so we come up with, of course, the Commission has a proposal, then we try to make it more ambitious. Then there is a delegation that goes there to negotiate this for the sake of the European Union. So that's basically where we're at. But there is so far, I mean, the COP meetings has really increased in importance the last couple of years, but the technical negotiations, of course, no one is really invited or can attend them, and it's extremely technical. So it's more of a gathering around the negotiations that is important. So in order to push, in order to meet, in order to network, and all of these things. So I think it's really grown in importance from a kind of an activist point of view as well.
Yeah, and now with Trump resigning, taking the US out of the agreement, and also Brazil now, the European Union becoming even more important. I guess they have more influence in talking. They have more.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the EU is very, very important, but I think also this kind of dialogue that you need to have with China is very important. Like that's the most important way of facilitating. Like, you need to build good relationships with these emerging economies as well in order to really tackle all of these things. So I don't see that the European Union, I mean, I think this being a net zero economy with carbon emissions from 2050 is very, very promising. But of course, with Brexit, everyone has been a bit frightened, and we are living in a union which is just working on keeping everything together. So to that sense, I think we're trying to be a facilitator, trying to be a good partner is also extremely important.
Okay. I'm going to see if we have more questions. How would those ocean cleanup projects work?
Yeah, but of course you already have kind of ocean cleanup projects where you have activists or going out with boats picking up litter. Of course, what we're doing legislative wise is that we're making a system for fishermen to get some payment, or being able to, when they are out fishing and they pick up litter, because they do regularly, so they tend to fish for a lot of litter as well. They can leave it at the harbor for no fee, and they are also maybe compensated to some certain extent. But of course, you want them to be doing this in their regular work, so it's not like you incentivize them to go out fishing for litter or something like that. But I think when you look at all of the plastic pollution that is going on, I think we could really benefit from having ocean cleanup projects. But that has to be developed as well, because of course you have to estimate like the fuel consumption. So if you have to use a lot of fuel going out and fish for some plastics, I mean then it's not really worth it, right? Because then you're already polluting the environment. So it's there to see how exactly we should do that. But I think we need to do it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Another question is, are you cooperating with Norway when it comes to oil spills in the ocean?
Yes, of course. So Norway actually, I've been on a Norwegian vessel looking at exactly how they do when they have oil spills. And that's quite impressive, actually. So they have come quite far. I mean, the Norwegians have a tremendous amount of money also to put in their fisheries and in their oil industry. So they are quite well prepared in order to act if they have an accident, for example.
Okay. Another question is, can you tell us more on blå tillväxt? I hope
Blue growth.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, that's the main buzzword when it comes to all of these things, marine activities connected with the oceans. So not only fisheries. Of course, like oil, drilling for oil and gas is not what I would call a sustainable blue economy. A lot of people do. So they just include everything that is that is at the oceans, basically, or at the, what we need to be really, really careful of is then this kind of extractive way of using a resource. So we could use the oceans exactly like we have used the terrestrial grounds, and that is not really that is going to be with some really, really horrible consequences. So once more, a green way of looking at it is to be really careful and to phase out fossil fuels once more, because of course you can have now deep sea mining for all of those valuable materials, minerals, gas and oil once more. And there's a lot of developing economies that really wants to do this because they want to enhance their own economies. I think that's going totally the wrong way. Of course, we need to go the other direction and really harvest the oceans from a totally other point of view. And we can. I mean, as I said, we can do plastics from algae instead. We can have fish farming that is not polluting the oceans in a circular system on land with minimal, how to say, waste. We could harvest like on other trophic levels, not only to eat like the big carnivore fish, but rather to eat like differentiated. So mussels and clams and all of these things. And that's what we need to do.
Okay. We have one last question. I think then we are already we filled the time very well.
Yes.
And this one is a long one. Will there be new alliances between the national parties, or will the groups be the same? I'm thinking, for example, of Macron's party En Marche. Similar topics as the Greens do. Couldn't they join the Green group?
Oh, that's really a very provocative issue. You know that Macron's party signed an agreement with ALDE, like the Liberals in the European Parliament. But what happens if the Greens are so few that we can't really build our own group? I mean, that would be very unlikely. But of course, then if that would be the case, we would try to go into another group, and then maybe the ALDE or the left group would be up. But let's hope that we have a green group in the parliament. That would be awful if we didn't.
Yeah, I think we all hope for that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Linnéa, so much. It was really
Thank you.
And I think we covered everything.
Yes.
And
thank you so much.
Fingers crossed for the elections.
Yeah. Thanks.
We will put up this video.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.